very first episode of Unnecessary Winners. As we were just saying before, this show is kind of a spin-off of a spin-off. Both of us have done shows on the network before. We were on Substack doing gambling shows, and we're combining now as we enter the football season into a bigger show called Unnecessary Winners. This show is going to air on playback every Tuesday for the time being, and then we will move to Fridays later in the season. Nick, how are you feeling? How are you feeling on this first episode?
All right. I think my bets have been doing okay so far. I mean, it's still the very beginning. I haven't gambled. Maybe I'm still a little rusty with the gambling. I'm not a big baseball bettor, so I haven't bet in since basketball season. And so far, my college bets have actually been pretty good. My college picks have been pretty good so far.
Yeah, it was weird because you normally don't get that week one in college football like we had this week, where there were so many good games. You get a game that's like maybe a Notre Dame, Florida State, or something like that very rarely. But to get all these games at once was very out of the ordinary, and it was great. It was so much, like you said, we haven't been betting baseball. It was so much so that on Monday I actually got an email from ESPN Bet that said, just to tell you your our responsible gaming behaviors show that you've been increasing your bet size and frequency in the last week. It was like, that's how much I wasn't betting in the summer versus now. But yeah, it was a great slate of games. I was probably about 50-50 for the weekend. I was on TCU. I was heavy on Miami. I was
too.
I don't know if you were the same way. I love them getting plus money at home. I actually am a Carson Beck believer. I think that I don't know if you're in the same camp there.
But a little bit. I think Carson Beck got a little bit of a bad rap at Georgia. He got a little bit of a bad rap at Georgia because I think a lot of the issues with Georgia last year was like his receivers. I mean, he's not a great player, but a lot of times his receivers just played terrible. And, that offense really wasn't great. So I think I'm a little bit of a Carson Beck believer, actually. A little bit.
So, yeah, I am too. And I was on that. I didn't touch, I think I didn't touch at all. I didn't touch Alabama, Florida State. Did not expect that. I expected Alabama to win the game.
Well, I expected Florida State to cover. I thought Alabama was favored by way too much. I am not terribly shocked by that outcome. I am not.
I think a lot of people, and obviously Alabama is a good team. Last year, a lot of people forget they had a down year, but they did almost make the play, or possibly should have made the playoff last year. But a lot of people have recency bias to where they were just taking, Florida State was terrible last year. Yeah. And that was part of their line. But college football now, especially, is so different year to year. And that was just really a blip on the radar for Florida State, who've been having good years. Were undefeated 2 years ago. So I think that was where that line came from, because 13.5 in Tallahassee was a lot.
Yeah, I thought I certainly did. And I guess there should have been more recency bias, because look how Alabama ended the season last year. I mean, they ended on a pretty bad foot.
Yeah, I just think Alabama's name carries credit, but I mean, I think that as the days and weeks go by, you're seeing how good of a coach Saban was. I mean, Alabama looks lost.
People are making it about Kalen DeBoer, but I think it has way more to do with Saban than with I think it says way more about Saban than it does about Kalen DeBoer. With the way Alabama used to be so dominant, and also just the new era of college football in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's it's been 2 years. This will be his second season, but if Alabama lose 2 more games this year, that I think that's the minimum where his seat will be really red hot.
I don't agree that his seat's going to be that hot, because it's going to be very difficult to buy out his contract. Because
but forget about the contract in a row. I'm talking about from the fans' perspective of Alabama.
Oh yeah, but the thing is, the Alabama fans are not the ones making the decisions, so they can't really rise up.
That's something that I think we're going to have to monitor throughout the year. But speaking of coaches that obviously have big names, I was on TCU yesterday, but were you surprised by the lopsidedness of the
Yes,
game?
and I was actually on UNC. I was on UNC so hot. I was so big on UNC that like I thought it would be a very opposite. I thought it would be the opposite. I didn't think UNC would kill them. I thought UNC would be able to win the game outright, and we would be like really surprised, pleasantly, depending how you feel about it, like pleasantly surprised from like a pro Belichick standpoint. I thought they were going to win outright. Um, and I thought the narrative would be completely different. I was so hot on UNC that I even told my dad to bet on UNC. And he did.
Yeah, not great there. I mean, I do think that people will sort of obviously Belichick will get a lot of talk, but I do think people have to realize, especially in the college game, it's the first year at college for a coach is normally not very good. Normally, it's a bad school, or it's not a bad school, but a bad team because they've had to fire a coach, and you come into the situation where you don't have your team in that first season. That's not your team at
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm not too hot on UNC this year, but I think that people will jump to conclusions, but it's going to be a process.
Well, people forget that, like, to me, I think Belichick at UNC reminds me a lot of Dion at Colorado. I mean,
Right.
the UNC's team last year wasn't quite as bad as the Colorado team Dion Sanders took over. But I mean, last year they went 6-7 and 3-5 in the ACC. So UNC was bad even for an ACC team last year. If Belichick can turn that around at least a little bit, and they have a winning record in conference, like that's somewhat of a success, I would say.
Right.
Like because that's at least a pretty good improvement, and I think there's still a really good chance that that could happen because most of their games this season are fairly winnable.
Right. Yeah, and the Dion thing sort of just got springboarded by their start to the first season there, and then obviously it fell apart. But they were on the cusp of Big 12 championship last year. All right, so let's get to our picks. So the way that this show is going to work is we're going to do unit by unit picks, 5 unit plays going up in units each time, 5 for college, 5 for the pros. We're going to have a money line winner of the week for either a college or a pro, and then we're going to close out and have locks for both college and pros. And at the end of the year, we're going to see who does the best unit wise. So, without further ado, let's get to the college first. So, I'm going to give my 1 unit play. I've got Kansas going to Missouri, border battle there. I like Kansas. I like Jalen Daniels getting 6.5. Missouri, I think are a decent team, but they're going to be middle of the pack SEC this year just because of the division they're in. I think Kansas might be getting a little overlooked this year because their name is Kansas. I'm going to take them at 6.5 for 1 unit. It's minus 110 for 1 unit. And I really love their quarterback play. I think they're going to be a bigger threat in the Big 12 than people think. I don't think they're going to win the Big 12. I think I'd probably have them about 8-4. But I like them getting a touchdown and a half, or sorry, 6.5 here. So it's basically a touchdown at Missouri, rivalry game. Haven't seen that one in a while, but I like Kansas plus 6.5 here.
All right, so my 1 unit pick for college, I'm taking Michigan plus 5.5 at Oklahoma. This is more of an anti-Oklahoma pick than it is a pro-Michigan pick. And I think the biggest issue with Oklahoma has been their offense. I mean, I think they're off. I mean, they're probably going to be a little better this year than last year, but like Brent Venables, defensive minded head coach, and their offense last year was just so inept that I don't know if I can trust them to cover the 5.5. Maybe I'm hyping up Bryce Underwood a little too much. Maybe it'll be a little bit like Arch Manning. The difference is that Arch Manning played at Ohio State, and this game is at Oklahoma. So I do like Michigan plus the 5.5, but I'm not super confident about it compared. That's why it's only my 1 unit pick. But yeah, it's more anti-Oklahoma than pro-Michigan.
Yeah, I have that on the card as well. I'll get to that, but I agree with you a lot on that. My 2 unit play, I'm going to go out west, Oklahoma State and Oregon. playing out in Eugene. Over is 58.5. To me, this feels like a game where Oregon is going to get out to like a 42 to nothing lead, and Oklahoma State maybe puts up 21 late in the game. I like the over a lot. I just think, I think Oregon's going to steamroll Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State just to me always screams over. They're a huge over team. Even with the conference realignment, the Big 12 will always be an over league to me.
Yeah.
And the Big 10 will always be an under no matter what. Like, I'll just always look at it that way. I think Oregon's going to crush them. I think Oregon has a worse team than they did last year, but Oklahoma State is really, really bad. They're going to finish dead last in the Big 12. And I think that Oregon's going to steamroll them. They're going to put up a lot of points, but I like a lot of backdoor points there. So I'm going to take Oklahoma State, Oregon over 58.5.
I don't know if I didn't bet that game, but like I don't know if my biggest problem with taking the over in that game is I'm afraid like Oklahoma State's just not going to score, and that Oregon will call the dogs off. Like I could see Oregon being up like an insane amount and then just calling the dogs off, and then that ends up being an under game because Oklahoma State score.
But I feel like I want them to call the dogs off because I want them to sort of take their foot off the pedal, especially defensively. Like, how many games have we seen where it team's up like 20, 30 points and then team sneaks in 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, that happens too. But a lot of times those games end up being under games. It's more like my biggest concern with that is that just if Oklahoma State looks the way they did last year, they hardly scored last year. It was unbelievably bad.
Yeah.
So my 2-unit pick is SMU -2.5 versus Baylor. SMU was fairly good last year, and their quarterback is still coming back. I don't know. I mean, they're playing. It's a home game against Baylor, and it's -2.5. It's just they're basically just giving a field goal. So I think SMU might have a similar season like they did last season. I could see. So I'm going to go with SMU -2.5.
Yeah, I like that pick too. Just I would pick that more of like who is Baylor. I actually think SMU was going to be sort of a down year. I think the ACC is really a 2-team league this year. Miami and Clemson. But I agree with that pick just because I don't think that Baylor is high enough position to be within a field goal of the team that was in the playoff last year.
Well, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think SMU is going to have the season they did is going to have quite the same season they did last year, just because their schedule is so much more difficult. I mean, they do. Right. I'm looking at their schedule now, and I mean, they do have to play Clemson. They have to play at Clemson, at Wake Forest, and at home against Miami. I mean, those could be 3 losses in a row right there.
Yeah. I think that they're not going to compete as high everywhere, but I would agree with that pick. My 3-unit, I'm going to agree with you on your first unit play. I'm a little higher on this one. Love Michigan. I might actually sprinkle a little money line here. Like Bryce Underwood, you mentioned Arch Manning. Arch Manning was thrown into the deep end in week 1. That was as tough a game as you could start with. But I think Underwood is not going to have that as I don't think he's going to be as good as Arch Manning, but I don't think that he's going to have the performance that Arch Manning did. Oklahoma is not Ohio State defensively. It's a tough place to play, definitely. I just think that Oklahoma, like you said, is not. I mean, like they were very mediocre last year, 6-6. Now, obviously, we just said that year to year it's much different in college football, but I just don't see them being the team that unseats Michigan here. I think that these lines for Michigan are very based on last year. Where Michigan started out really slow, but they actually ended really well, beat Ohio State, beat Alabama. And I think that people are still thinking about, well, Michigan was 7-5 last year. They weren't a top team. I actually think Michigan might finish 3rd in the Big Ten this year. I think they are going to be very good. They've got the best recruit in the country.
Behind Ohio State and Penn State, I assume?
Yeah. So I think they're going to finish above Oregon. So I think that they could win this game outright. Love it at 5.5, so I'm going to take that for a 3-unit play.
Yeah, no, I very much agree with that. I mean, people also have to remember, I think a lot of it probably is recency bias. But I also think that I also think that like you also have to remember that Michigan last year they couldn't get their quarterback situation straight. Like they played like three different quarterbacks. One of them retired in the middle of the season. Well, like that's part of the
Right.
reason they were so bad. And they just never were able to.
Well, and they just lost their coaching staff and all that, and they still ended up beating Ohio State in Ohio, so
Yeah, and Alabama.
in
Uh,
Alabama.
so yeah. So my third pick, my 3-unit pick is Ole Miss Kentucky under 50 and a half. Kentucky always turns these games into slugfests.
Mhm.
And I mean, Kentucky, like I've said this before, but Kentucky's almost like the Purdue of the SEC. Like they're not that good of a team, but they end up often playing good teams close and being like a bit of a spoiler. Although Purdue wasn't like that last year, but frequently Purdue is like that. I think this game is going to be under. Kentucky always turns these games into slugfest, and I think that I could see Kentucky. I could see them playing this game on Kentucky's terms, like they did last year. So the 50 and a half under, even if Ole Miss ends up putting up 30 and they win like 30-20 or something like that, it ends up being an under game. So and I don't think Ole Miss is going to put up 30 in this game.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I like that pick too. Number 4, there's 3 teams in the top 15 right now that I think will not be ranked at the end of the season. One of those teams is Illinois. I'm not high on them. I think they're in a tough division. I think that I would probably put them about 8-4, 7-5. I don't like them as a number 12 seed. This is not a Duke team from 10 years ago that you can roll over. Very good team, coached very well. Going to Duke week 2 feels like a bit of a trap is not the right word, but it feels like a bit of a trap, I'll say, for a top 15 ranked team. Getting points, I like Duke to cover the 2.5 plus 2.5 against Illinois, and I actually like them to win the game outright.
I didn't bet that game, but I actually kind of agree with that. Like I could see a bit of a letdown game from Illinois. I mean, Duke tends to be a pretty good like early season team.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, it's going to be tough going on the road in that environment. I mean, like you don't, I don't have a whole lot of faith in them. I think that Illinois might have a little bit of a letdown season this year compared to last year. My 4-unit pick is, I hate how much I love this. South Florida plus 9.5 against Florida first half. This total spread is 17.5, but first half plus 9.5. South Florida in these early season games against SEC teams, they always play them tough, at least in the first half. They always play them tough, just like they did last year against Alabama, I think, and against Miami. Now, Alabama and Miami, they ended up winning by big margins, but the first half, South Florida always really gives it a lot. And Florida, I think Florida is going to struggle, and I think they'll pull away and probably cover. But I could see this being. I think South Florida is going to give them trouble in the first half.
I actually would bet the opposite of that, and I'll tell you why. The one thing you forget about that is South Florida just beat the shit out of Boise State, and I feel like big letdown spot coming.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that argument too. But it could just be a sign that South Florida is just pretty good this year.
Yeah, it's true.
Or that Boise State is just not good because
I think it's more of that, but it's definitely possible. But first half, I can see what you mean by they're going to keep it close in that first half, and then maybe Florida boat races them in the second half. The other team, it was going to go to my 5-unit play. The other team that I think, just so the Illinois fans don't get on me, the other team that is in the top 15 that I do not think will be ranked at the end of the year is Arizona State. I think they're going to drop off. They lost a lot of offense from last year, Justin Cam Scadaboo. They got to go to Mississippi State. Now, I'm not going to touch the number, though. I'm not going to touch the spread, even though I kind of would lean toward Mississippi State. I like the over. I think ASU, even though they lost a lot of offense with Scadaboo, I think Sam Levitt is a very good quarterback. Jordan Tyson, who was injured during ASU's run last year, is a really good receiver. They've got some depth at receiver. I think they're going to score a lot, but they gave up 20 points on Saturday to Northern Arizona. I don't think that Mississippi State is as bad as Northern Arizona, albeit Mississippi State I don't think is a very good team. But I like the over here, 59.5. Again, ASU is Pac-12, Big 12, which I will always look at as an over league. And 59.5 is semi-low, considering I think ASU can score 30, and I definitely think they can give up at least 30. So for 5 units, I've got ASU, Mississippi State over 59.5.
And to be clear, for those of you who don't know, Liam's an Arizona State fan and is an Arizona State graduate. So yeah, if you couldn't see that. So
yes. I don't think they're going to be terrible. I just think that they're not going to be 10-2.
No, probably. I agree. Probably not.
They lost Cam Scatterbo, even though, to be fair to me, if I was going to lose Cam Scatterbo, I got the best case scenario because he went to the Giants. But I'm not leaning either way. I think that ASU is going to fall off, but I think Mississippi State is really bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to lose it, but I do like the over there.
Yeah. All right. So my 5-unit pick is, you're not going to believe this, UNC minus 12.5 versus Charlotte.
I don't hate that at all.
They're playing Charlotte. This is a perfect bounce back game after getting killed by TCU. Yeah. I'd be pretty stunned if UNC doesn't win this game by at least 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all because I feel it feels like maybe it's one of these games where everyone's gonna say UNC is fucking awful, and they come out now they're playing Charlotte again, like you said. 12.5 is low for sure. I mean, if UNC had won, let's say this. I mean, now it's irrelevant because UNC got boat raced last night, brutally destroyed. But if UNC had won last night, they'd probably be about a 22-point favorite.
Oh yeah, yeah. And by the way, if UNC had won and they were a favorite, I don't think it would be that high, and they were favorited by that much, I would definitely go against UNC. But in this case, I think that, look, what they say is you're never as bad or as good as you think. And I think that's the case right now with UNC. Like, they're not as bad as you think.
Yeah. All right, let's head over to the league where they play for pay. The NFL is starting this week, finally. It's been a long off season. Thank God the NFL is back in just 2 days. I'm going to start off with my first unit play. It's a team that I'm hot on. They're over because I look at their schedule and it screams over to me. I think they're about an 8.5 over. I love their over. I love them to cover the spread here on Thursday night, and that team is the Dallas Cowboys. I think that trade is not as bad as people think.
That's what I was saying. I totally agree.
I think they were able to get rid of a locker room distraction and possibly cancer in the locker room, and also get 2 first-round picks. I think that I really think that people thought that was overblown, and I think their return was better than people think as well. I think if you look at these games where the first game of the season where a team comes out that's just won the Super Bowl, they're always close. And a lot of times the team that won the Super Bowl loses. The Chiefs lost a couple of years ago. The Cowboys actually almost beat the Buccaneers. What was that, 3 years ago? Yeah. When everyone had the Buccaneers high on them. I'm not saying the Cowboys are going to win this game. I think the Eagles will win the game. But 7.5, a touchdown and more than a touchdown. For games that are always close, it's banner night. The Eagles have been hungover from a celebration. They really didn't play in many close games during the postseason or in the season in general, for that matter. I like the Cowboys to cover 7.5 here to open the season.
I very much agree with that pick, actually. If I were betting that game, I would probably take it too. I like Ravens Bills over 50.5 for my 1-unit pick. I feel like these games tend to be very high scoring. And the Ravens last year, their defense gave up a lot of points. And 50.5, like, I could see both of these teams scoring, at least one of them scoring 30. I think it's going to be close because I think both these teams are going to end up scoring a lot. Um,
Mhm.
it might hurt me if Mark Andrews drops another pass in the end zone, but um, I could. I think this game is going to be a bit of a shootout.
Yeah, I like that too. And just both offenses scream shootout early in the season. You're gonna have good weather there, night game. Yeah, I agree. Totally. I feel like that's gonna be a run and gun kind of game. My next game is a game that I know that we'll also get to later in the show, but I am a New York Giant fan and had the unfortunate uh, experience of watching years of Daniel Jones. He is not a good quarterback. Um, I think that a team that's sort of being looked over a little bit, I don't think they're going to be great, but I think they're being looked over a little bit, is the Miami Dolphins. I don't think the Colts have a good roster outside of the quarterback, which is kind of the most important part. So I don't love them. They've had a lot of controversy at quarterback. I mean, Anthony Richardson was so bad he lost his job to Daniel Jones, um, who was essentially on the practice squad for the Minnesota Vikings to end last year. I like the Dolphins. You just need them to win the game. But you don't even need them to win the game. They could lose by 1 point. Getting 1.5. Love Miami here.
Yeah, we'll get to that pick later
Mhm.
in the game. Mine is my 2 unit pick is actually the Falcons plus 2.5. They're getting 2.5 points at home uh against the Bucks. I think the Bucks last season they were better late in the season than they were early. I mean, they did lose to the Falcons twice. I understand it's like a total different quarterback, totally different team. But I think that these teams are actually fairly close, and 2.5 at home. I just like the 2.5 points at home. I think the Falcons win this. I can see the Falcons winning this outright.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like the Buccaneers are perpetual slow starters too.
They are, and like the
Um,
truth is, they're not they're not that good. They're okay. They're in a
yeah,
weak. They're an okay
the
team
division is
in a
just
weak
abysmal.
division.
Yeah,
All the South divisions, the South divisions are always so bad
yeah. They have like the opposite of the
of
of
college
college
football.
football.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, my third pick, which and I'll talk about a little bit later in the show as well. Um, I like the Houston Texans. I think the Houston Texans, sort of similar to what I think about the Cowboys, are going to be on an upswing. I think you had a sophomore slump with C.J. Stroud last year, and that's going to I think the Texans were good 2 years ago, and that clouded people's judgment of them. And then I think they were on the opposite end of the spectrum, and that's clouding people's judgment of them in a different way. I think the Texans are going to be better. The Rams, I'm not as high on them as some people were. Yes, they were the closest team to the Eagles last year. They have a decent team. They were decently coached. I just don't really care about the Rams being at home. That means nothing because they really have no home field advantage. Um, and I like the Texans plus 2.5 here. I think they're going to have a much better year than they did last year.
I think they'll probably have a little better of a year than they did last year. I'm not very. I don't agree very much on that. I am not very. Actually, I agree with you a little bit on the Texans. I don't think. I think the Texans are overrated. I don't really think they're that good. I think they're comparable to a team like the Bucks. I think they're just a fairly decent team in just a really weak division. I mean, their division's much weaker than the Bucks division. I mean, there's like nobody in that
Mhm.
division. I'm not really. I am not like. I'm not. I think Stroud's a little overrated. I don't think he's that good. I think he had a pretty good first year. I think he's a decent he's a franchise quarterback. I don't think he's that great. Um, my third pick is, and maybe this should be a little higher, but Steelers minus 2.5 at MetLife Stadium. Um, look, only 2.5 points. I think the Steelers are a much better team than the Jets. I think the Jets could potentially be like the worst. I mean, other than maybe like the Saints, I think they might be like, and maybe in Cleveland, they might be like the third worst team in the NFL this year. I mean, I have really low expectations for the Jets. Would it not be the most Jets thing for Aaron Rodgers to go into MetLife and beat them? I mean, I don't think. I'm not saying I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have like a great game. He's probably going to look similar to what he looked like last year. But I think the Steelers. I mean, I also think last year's Jet team with Aaron Rodgers might end up being a lot. It's probably would be a lot better than this year's Jets team. So yeah, I really like the Steelers -2.5, and like that's going to be that's going to be the storyline on WFAN. It's just going to be Aaron Rodgers comes back to MetLife and whoops the Jets.
Yeah, I'll get to that pick later as well. I have a pretty bold prediction for the season, which is that there is a team that has been good the last 2 years that has missed their Super Bowl window, and I think will miss the playoffs this year. And that team is the Detroit Lions. I think the Lions had 2 chances in a row to go and win the Super Bowl. They missed them both. There's not very long windows in the NFL. They've lost their 2 coordinators. I think they're going to have a drop off this year. And I am high, even though I mentioned that the trade was not as good as people thought. I am high, talking Super Bowl high on the Green Bay Packers. I really think they are a really good team. I think Jordan Love is a good quarterback. I think they've got a chance to do something this year. I think they're going to beat Detroit. I see like a 31-17 here. In Lambeau, the Lions they won their last year, but not been historically great at Lambeau against the Packers. I think the Packers are really good. I think the Lions are going to take a downturn. Love the 2.5 in this game.
I didn't pick this, but I don't think the Lions missed their Super Bowl window. The way I see it is I am not as high on the Packers as you are. I think that they're I think that they're Super Bowl contenders, but also last year, I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to continue this year. Last year, the Packers could barely win games in their division. I mean, they went 1-5 in the division last year, and the only reason they won that one game against the Bears was because of a flub by Caleb Williams, because he doesn't know how to tell time apparently. It was just clock mismanagement on the Bears. But I still like the Lions. I'm still pretty high on the Lions, even though they lost their 2 coordinators, because I think that for a while last year, they were like the best team in football I would have said, at least for a while, I thought they were the best team in football. The problem is they just got injured. There were just so many injuries that they had on defense that was a bit of an issue. My 4 pick, and this is bold, really bold. I'm staying in New York. Giants +6.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I think the Giants are going to win this outright. I think the Giants are going to lose this game in very Giants fashion, similar to how they lost last season to the Commanders. The Giants always plays you have to remember, the Giants always play the Commanders tough. And I could potentially see a little bit of a I think I'm cool. I'm not too high on the Commanders this year. I don't think they're going to live up to what they did last season. I think they're a good team. I don't feel the same way about them that I do about the Texans, but I could see there being a bit of a sophomore slump, some struggles for Jaden Daniels I could see. But I think it's more about I think that the Giants, I mean, it's one of those things where with Jackson Dart, I think that it's one of those things where a lot of times when quarterbacks first get into the league, they end up doing really well because other teams don't have film on them.
Yeah, Jackson Dart's not playing though.
Oh, he's not starting?
No, Russell Wilson is.
Russell Wilson starting. Well, either way, I still think with Russell Wilson, I actually like Russell Wilson. So I think either way, Russell Wilson, I think either way, the Giants look good with Russell Wilson. I mean, I think Russell Wilson's similar to an Aaron Rodgers. I just think the Giants are going to look fairly good. I think they're going to lose, but I think they're going to look fairly good.
Yeah, I am a very realist about the Giants. Not like other podcasts out there who thought that their floor was 7 wins last year, and that Daniel Jones with 2 left feet was better than Sam Darnold. Unlike those Giant fans out there, I'm very real about the Giants. I actually think the Giants are going to win this game. It feels to me like a couple of years ago when the Giants were playing the Titans, and the Titans had just come off of going to deep in the playoffs, and then the Giants won that game, which is more about the Titans kind of falling off. I agree about the Commanders. I don't think the Commanders are going to be as good. And not only is I don't know about sophomore slump, they have the oldest roster in the NFL as well. So I'm again, and also I think the Commanders also they eked out the win against Tampa. Detroit played awful in the game, and it was still kind of close. And then they got destroyed by the Eagles. I think they sort of lucked their way into that game. Don't think that they're the second best team in the NFC. So
No.
which they were last year. So I agree with that. I think the Giants are going to win that game. I think the Giants, even though I'm high on the Cowboys, I think the Giants actually have a realistic shot to win both their first two games. The problem with the Giants is they could make a market improvement this year, a serious improvement. I mean, it'd be tough to be much worse, but they could make a serious improvement, and it just wouldn't show up as much on the record because their schedule is insanely brutal.
Yeah, just the quarterback situation, like just that alone.
I was at MetLife Stadium this week, and they showed the thing with the home opponents, and the home opponents for the Giants was almost like someone said, who are the best teams in the NFL, and list them, and that was the home opponents. They have like the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Eagles, obviously, the Packers. It's an insane schedule, so I think the Giants will be a lot better on the field. I just don't know if their record will reflect it. My 5-point pick. Now, I said I think the Packers are going to the Super Bowl from the NFC. I think from the AFC, there's one of these teams has missed their Super Bowl window already. Like I said with the Lions, this is a similar game to me, where one team's missed their Super Bowl window and the other team I think is going to the Super Bowl. The team I think is going to the Super Bowl from the AFC is the Baltimore Ravens, and I love them here. I think the Bills have missed their window more than the Lions. I mean, the Bills have had how many opportunities where they just could not get past the Chiefs, and that close and that close and that close, and they sort of are that Buffalo team from the 90s, in my opinion, just they couldn't get past the AFC. Yeah. But that team never won a Super Bowl. I don't think the Bills are going to win a Super Bowl. How many times are they going to miss the mark? And Josh Allen's only getting older. Now, he's a great quarterback, but he never really has any weapons. And I think the Ravens are good. And remember, even if the Ravens don't win the Super Bowl, I think that right now, I think it's Packers, Ravens, Super Bowl. But the Ravens are always a really good regular season team. And I think they come out and win this game. I mean, I think the Bills are going to win their division, partly based on how awful the division is. And I think they'll make the playoffs, but I really like the Ravens. I'm hot on the Ravens. The Bills are laying a 1.5, but I really love the Ravens to win this game. I like the over, like you said. I think the offense is going to be a show. And I think I could see like a 34-31 Ravens in this one.
I mean, so basically the Bills, they're giving 1.5 at home, which is Vegas telling you that the Ravens are slightly better.
Right.
I think all those things you say about the Bills are true, but they could also kind of be said about the Ravens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the Bills.
I think the Ravens have a better roster than the Bills, though.
Yes, but also the Ravens play in a tougher division than the Bills do. I mean, the Bills are just in an awful division. I mean, the next best team for the Ravens is the Bengals in their division, and for the Bills, it's the Dolphins. And those teams could be pretty comparable if Tua stays healthy, but he almost never does. So the Bengals, I think, are they didn't have a great season last year, obviously, but I think the Bengals.
Well, the Bengals, I think, will be
twice last year. People forget.
Well, I think the Bengals would be a Super Bowl team if they had any sort of defense.
Oh yeah, but also they were potentially if they had any defense at all. But also, like, even if they had just won a couple of those easy games last year, even if they had just managed to beat New England week 1 last year, they could have gone to the Super Bowl.
Right. And if they had a better record or some sort of defense which gave him a better record, Joe Burrow would have possibly been the MVP, at least in the MVP conversation.
Oh, yeah. So I think I just think the Ravens division is tougher. And I think outside, and then maybe it could end up, maybe New England could end up being a really difficult team in the AFC East again. I also kind of think that, but like right now, I think the Steelers might be a bigger threat to them than the Patriots.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, either way, like I said, I like the over in this game. I didn't pick a winner, um, but yeah, I see it, I see your logic. I definitely see your
Yeah.
logic. Uh, so or, yeah, that's all five, right?
You gave your 5? Your
Did I
5th?
not give my five? Oh my god, I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. I didn't. I forgot to give my pick. My 5 unit pick is Broncos minus 7.5. They're playing at home against the Titans. I think
Mhm.
I think that Denver wins this game by like 2 touchdowns or more. Tennessee right now is just a total disaster. They're probably worse than the Jets. And I think, like, look, I am not high on Denver. I think Denver is one of the more overrated teams in the NFL. Like, I don't think they're going to have that good of a season.
Mm.
Everybody like picking them to like win the division over the Chiefs. I'll believe it when I see it. I think they're a bit overrated, but just in this game, I think Denver's going to kill them. I just don't think it's going to be close.
Yeah, I completely agree, and the Titans are a complete mess. The Titans fired Mike Vrabel because they didn't want to give him a GM position as well, and then they ended up firing their GM last year anyway. And so they're a complete mess. I agree with that. I think Denver. I agree with people not being as high on Denver as most people, but I actually think that the Chiefs are going to have a little bit of a down. I think the Chiefs might still win the division, but I think they're going to have a down year.
I think they're going to have a
Um,
little bit of a first of all, last year was a down year too, and they went 15-2. And one of the games they essentially lost on purpose. So, I mean, like even if the Chiefs do have a down
Correct,
year for
correct.
the
And
Chiefs,
I saw you say this on a different show too. But you have to. But how many of those? But like the blocked field goal against Denver, they should have lost that. How many of those games were one score games where uh, one score would have made them, 10-7 or something, in each
yeah,
of those games.
but I don't think it's going to drop. I agree. I get that. I could see them winning. I could see them ending up winning like 13 games this year,
Right.
12 or
Yeah.
13, which probably wins the division because, their division isn't that good. I mean, the Chargers and Broncos are good teams, but they're not great teams. And
Yeah.
people forget that, like,
I agree.
towards the end of the year last year, the Broncos and Chargers, especially the Chargers, they didn't look good at all. I mean, the Chargers totally crashed and burned. And, like, let's not pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. All right. So let's go to the money line underdog winners that we both have. We both have discussed both of these games during the picks, but I'm going to start. I discussed it earlier. I'm double dipping on this one. I had it as a unit play. Love the Texans plus 125. Love them to go into the Rams. Discussed it earlier. Texans plus 125.
Um, So my money line winner for the my money line winner is the Dolphins. I very much agree with everything you said about the Dolphins and the Colts. The Colts are terrible. Um, like I'm actually kind of stunned that the Colts are favored are actually the are favored in this game. Um, yeah, I think the Dolphins are really slept. I think the Dolphins can be really good. I think they really can be a good team as long as they're healthy and Tua doesn't get knocked out and they have to basically and Zach Wilson ends up being their quarterback. But as long as Tua can get through this game, I think they'll not only I think they'll win by quite a lot. Actually, I have
Yeah.
no faith at all in the Colts.
Yeah. I took Dolphins as well. I love that.
I mean, they're barely.
All right.
By the way, let me just say they're barely underdogs. I think it's like they're like minus. Wait, I'll pull it up right now and on DraftKings they are minus 108. So it's almost a pick.
Yeah. It's almost a
They are
pick 'em. And then, like you said earlier with the Bills game, the fact that the Colts are under 3 points basically tells you they think it's either even or the Dolphins are slightly better.
Yeah,
Um,
they're telling you the Dolphins are slightly better. I think the Dolphins are much better than the Colts.
yeah, I agree with that. All right, it is time to move on to the locks of the week. I'm going to start in college. I'm actually going to go out to Vegas for my lock of the week. Listen, last week, Tennessee fans were probably laughing all the way to the bank because they watched Nico at UCLA really shit the bed. But UCLA was playing a team that I think could be a college football playoff team in the Utah Utes. I think that UCLA are not going to be atrocious this year. Now they're in the Big Ten. They're probably not going to make a bowl, but I don't think that speaks to their play on the field as much as it speaks to how high the division is. And I think that they played a really good team. I think Utah could make the college football playoff, especially now that they have their 25-year starter, Cam Rising, gone. But I think UCLA was not I think they were shown to be a bad team. I don't think they're as bad as they were shown. They're going to UNLV, and they're only laying 2.5 points. Love UCLA in that one. Lock for me. I think UCLA is going to have to win these games out of conference against a team like UNLV. I think they win this one. I think they win it quite easily. My lock of the week for college, UCLA minus 2.5 at UNLV.
My lock of the week, and I'm surprised you didn't bring up this game at any point. I'm surprised you didn't bet on this game. And it's going to go in line with what you said. The Big Ten being an under conference. I mean, only one of these is a Big Ten team. Iowa State under.
I knew what you were going to say before you.
Under 41.5. I feel like if it was under 40, I'd take the over, but the under 41.5, I could see this. I have a feeling this is going to be like I don't usually make exact predictions, but I think the most likely outcome is that this game ends 20-17 Iowa State.
Yeah, I agree with you about Iowa under. I'll tell you why I wouldn't touch that under. Rocco Becht. I think he's a good. I like Rocco Becht.
Right, Iowa's defense.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I mean, I would. I think that you would die by 1,000 paper cuts betting the over ever in an Iowa game. But yeah, it feels like one of those. I think I would take. I would love the under there. I just didn't touch it because of Rocco Becht, but yes, I do like that under. All right, my lock of the week for the NFL. It's a game we talked about earlier. Steelers. Like you said, first of all, I think the Jets made a big mistake with this Aaron Rodgers thing. I think it's handled
very much agree. I very much agree.
Not as high on Aaron Glenn as some people were. We'll see how it goes. But I like the Steelers here. Now, and let's first put it. The Steelers-Jets at MetLife is a quasi-neutral site game. There will be I think it'll probably be about 60-40 Jets. There will be a shit ton of Steeler fans there. I think Rodgers, people forget. I mean, the team wasn't great last year. Aaron Rodgers, by Jet quarterback standards, was very good. His numbers. He had a good game, especially that last game against the Dolphins. Remember, the Dolphins needed to win that game to get into the playoffs. And I think he was really good. I think he's still good. And remember, he's coming off of a ruptured Achilles. I think the Jets are a complete mess. I think the handling of the Aaron Rodgers situation from the jump was atrocious. Not having a backup in that season was atrocious. Then the handling of it last year, firing the coach at 2-3 and just putting in they were just joke. I wonder if Sauce Gardner was a flash in the pan or if he's going to go back to being okay. I just don't know. I agree that I don't think I think the Jets, I would be higher on the Jets than you were, but I agree that I don't think they're going to be a very good team. I think the Steelers are going to be a decent team. I think they could. I think you're going to have a classic Mike Tomlin 9-8 sneak in, lose by 50 in the first round. Love the Steelers here. You said you don't know if he's going to have a great game. The most Jets thing ever would be if he goes like 350, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Yeah.
Which would be all-time Jets. It's going to be I think the Steelers win. I think this is like a 31-14. I think the Steelers rout them. I think Beningo's going to be screaming on Monday morning on WFAN. And yeah.
Well,
love the
he's basically retired now, so it'll be like Saturday mornings because that's what he.
He comes on every Monday morning.
Yeah, that's
to
true. He does.
to a winner.
Beningo, he's like the Jon Stewart of sports talk hosts. Like he's supposed to be
Yeah, he does
retired
one
and
day
he
a
keeps
week.
making appearances. Like, what do you like?
Yeah,
What is this?
and I don't know what, and I don't think that Justin Fields is going to be terrific either. I don't know if
No, of
you're
course not. Well, yeah, and also, yeah, you're right. Like the Jets totally mishandled the situation, and Aaron Rodgers, like, really just was not as bad as people said he was. He wasn't great, but yeah, I do think he was a little underrated. Like I think he had an underrated season, and a lot of it was just that people were mad at him for the Jets making a bunch of moves that Aaron Rodgers wanted. But I mean, like, they didn't. First of all, the Jets didn't have to make those moves. I mean, they could have told him
right.
no. So
Right.
that's more on the organization that is on him. And the other thing is that, like, that wasn't exactly the problem necessarily. Like, the problem was not that they went
Right.
out and got Devontae Adams. It was that they didn't have a head coach. That was the problem. They had
Well, I
a
think well, the other thing that is, I don't think that where Rodgers sort of fucked around with Green Bay at the end there, but I don't think he did anything to the Jets that was warranting the way he was sort of treated at the end. If his story is accurate, I think there's probably an in between there. Like for instance, he said he had a 2-minute meeting. It was probably close to like an hour or something. But um, I just didn't understand it. And I think that with the Jets, I mean, obviously, it's tough for me. I mean, I don't know because I'm not a Jet fan, but I have been a fan of a terrible team. But how you can tell a fan base that hasn't, oh, we're building here. They haven't made the playoffs in 15 years. I mean, it's
they
tough to
haven't
be like,
they
oh,
haven't made a playoff in half
since
my
2010,
yeah,
15 years. Yeah.
half my life.
Yeah. So
14 years
the
technically.
longest
Half
streak
my
in
life.
all of North American sports. So it's tough to tell a team you're building. And for me, it was
Yeah,
like you
building
have
what?
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, you have Aaron Rodgers, but you also have these two, in my opinion,
Hmm.
generational talents. Even though I said he had a down year last year in Wilson and Gardner, you have Brees Hall, who's young. When these guys are in their prime window, which it could be very short in the NFL, I just feel like you have to sort of go for something. And again, like it wasn't his fault. Okay, the moves he made that they made, but if he doesn't tear his Achilles in that first game, they probably make the playoffs that year. Or if they had any sort of backup plan,
Yeah.
and then last year I think they could have made the playoffs with any kind of reasonable coach. They made such a bad decision, and then you've got the Suns involved, giving game balls to Garrett Wilson instead of the coach. It was just a disaster, and ownership is way bigger problem than what Aaron Rodgers was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it reminds me a little bit of when the Mets played the Royals in the World Series and Matt Harvey like insisted on staying in the game. Like I blame that on Terry Collins a lot more than Matt Harvey because Terry Collins is the manager. He could have told him no, just like the Jets could have told Aaron Rodgers no. So yeah, we could talk about this forever, but yes, I don't think he's going to go 350, 4 touchdowns, but I think that he will. I think that the Jets will have a hard. I think he'll give the Jets a lot of trouble. I am not a huge Aaron Glenn fan. I think that people are just really high on him because he's a former Jet and talks a big game. Reminds me a little
Right.
bit of Mike McCagnon.
Right.
Mike McCagnon talked a big game because he was replacing John Idzik. It's a similar thing with Aaron
Right.
Glenn. He's just replacing Jeff Ulbrich, who's like not even qualified to be a head coach. So, it's easy to be really high on Aaron Glenn. I think it's a pretty overrated hire. So my lock, I'm going against you. Rams -2.5. I like the Rams to win this division. And I like that I understand their home field advantage is not great, but they are playing at home. They only have to win by a field goal against Houston.
Yeah.
I don't think Houston is that good. I think the Rams end up winning. I'm really high on the Rams this year. I think they're going to end up winning the NFC West. I like the Rams -2.5.
Yeah, I can't agree with you, but I will say about the home field advantage is the Texans aren't a team that brings a lot of fans, so that's not going to be like
No,
Steelers or something. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. That'll definitely shake the units up definitely. All right, so that will do it for this very first episode of Unnecessary Winners. We will be back next Tuesday at 4 and recap everything that we've picked. have some new picks for you. Good luck if you're gambling. Enjoy the first weekend of NFL and college football, and we will see you next week.
And you'll see the scores, see who's right in this battle. So
Yeah,
see you
so
then.